And the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
My name is Nicola Charles and I'm a proud anti-vaxxer from Victoria, Australia. Now, I've been worried about vaccines for a long time, but it's not just those clear substances in vials that get injected into people's arms that I'm concerned about. It's vaccines being dropped from the sky as aerosols and vaccines that are added to liquids that we can drink. In 2013, the Australian government administered 1,000 cholera vaccines to recipients in a drink. Who is delivering your water every day, and what is the quality of that water? They've already told us that it contains fluoride, a neurotoxin. 3 years ago, I stopped drinking tap water and recently went onto the Zeta Potential program. This adds alkalinity to the blood and also increases your electrolytes. Something is giving people mass cancers around the world, and jumping onto Zeta Potential for me has been one way for me to alleviate my fears. If you want to jump on the knowledge train with regard to water, click on the link below this show.
Hello and welcome. It's Tuesday, May the 13th, 2025, and this is the Daily Australian Radio Show. You're looking at the two famous faces that make up this show that is breaking ground all around the world. Well, one of us is a famous face and the other one is the Invisible Man. My name is Jason Olborn and my partner in news, here she is, Nicola Charles. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, Jason. I forgot. You just said it's May the 13th. The month is flying by. Seriously. I forgot to say on the 4th, May the 4th be with you.
Yes, well, we're 9 days late, but that's okay. Better late than never.
God. You know what? I always talk about the first thing I see when I wake up in the morning, and it's pretty early today. You can see the sun is just coming up in my window behind us. But I saw a fantastic clip, interestingly, as we're online, from Silicon Valley, right? And it turns out that the women who live and work in Silicon Valley with all these tech guys, that's their job. They work with these tech guys, have actually had enough. And they think that this transhumanist ideology, all these leftist ideologies have reached their sell-by date, and they've got evidence as to why. So one of the things they were talking about is how on the left, for years and years and years, and these women age range between mid-20s to 40, right?
Mm.
They were talking about how the left always pushed, it was big in America, I don't know if it's big here, this idea of coexist. You remember that thing when they said they were environmentalists before they started chopping down the snowy mountains? And they'd have it on all of their Prius cars, right? Before EVs, coexist. We've all got to coexist. And they were saying that these Silicon Valley guys, they can't coexist with anybody because they push the whole jab thing.
Mm.
They don't like the unvaccinated. So there's no coexisting there for a time. And the reason it's reached their sell-by date is that they've said these men now, these wealthy, successful guys in Silicon Valley, are actively seeking out for themselves the most natural females they can. And they liken it to the sort of hippie chicks, natural chicks, even girls with a lot of faith in God, the kind of women who go to Burning Man. I'm sure you know Burning Man is a big thing out there in the desert. And they were saying these are the women that these men are now seeking out. So they said while they're out there, and this is how they describe it, while these Silicon Valley guys are out there essentially describing a human zoo where they decide whether you've got a chip in the head or whether you're jabbed or not. And they decide how many hours of sunlight you're going to get a day because everything's regulated now, which is why they started with the 1 to 2 hours of exercise a day during the pandemic to get you used to it. They said they're such hypocrites because the women they're going for are the Burning Man, unvaccinated, natural, hippie, and they also really like women who have a faith in God. They're going after, those are the women that they want to have families with, and those are the women they're attracted to. And they want nothing to do with the other women that bought into the PSYOP. Isn't that interesting, Jason?
It's fascinating, and you wonder, therefore, have they realized something, or did they know this all along? Because themselves, many of them would be somewhat artificial if they've gone down, a jab highway, for instance. Are they
Mm.
realizing that they've made a wrong decision and they're sort of hedging their bets, or are they realizing that now they're going to use their economic prowess, if you will, to be able to secure the woman of their dreams? It's all natural. It's a phenomenon, isn't
But
it?
it's that thing, isn't it? If it's okay for thee, but not for me.
Oh, of course. That's the real point behind it all. It's just shocking.
Yeah.
But you wonder, in this whole dating game, people looking for love and partners, etc. The other day I was flicking through X, and like you just said, with the first thing that you see in the morning. So I opened up my X account on my phone, and the first thing was a video of a lady who with blonde sort of curly-ish hair. She has a bit of makeup on. I found her, there was nothing wrong with her. She was an attractive lady. And she said she was 53 and she'd lost hope in ever finding her partner. And
Oh,
and so she delivers this 30-second, 1 minute description, and she was quite sad about it. And it sort of, when something just strikes home because it's personal, it's social media, so you feel that it's real. So
yeah.
as I do, I click on and just read some of the comments to find out where we are. And there's a lot of women who you could see their photographs and were also attractive women, and they were sharing their stories of how they were traded in, if you will, for a younger spouse from the husband, despite having two or three kids. The usual stories, these horrible stories. And you think about it and you think that there must be men out there in their 40s and 50s that have also gone through divorce or have gone through hard times. And you can see that these people will eventually repartner and move on and whatever, but at the moment they're stuck. But then I saw some of the most horrific comments from men, many of whom were obviously younger, in their 30s and 40s, saying things like, "Gosh, horrible things like, basically referring to this lady's age as being washed up, and that she wasn't attractive, and these
I get that. Mm.
horrific things." And I'm thinking, you really are just speaking, bullshit right now, because first of all, we can't see your real face, and
Yeah.
we know you're this fat, ugly, bald guy that can't attract anything. And we can see right through it all. And then some guy said, the way that you're speaking, it'd be interesting to talk to your boss about, because it says your employment on your profile. And the guy comes back and says, "I am the boss." And I thought, well, that tells me everything I need to know.
Yeah.
You are as we like to say in Australia, you are a wanker of the highest order. But
Australians said flog, Jason, instead of that word.
well, I guess we can, whatever we use as the derogatory term of choice is well worth it. But I
How
mean,
mean.
could you imagine, though, being a perfectly normal human being in any other circumstance, but you've just hit your wits' end at the dating game, and just the general feeling of loneliness, which is for many people, for all of us, is the hardest emotion to deal with, just being a single person. And going through all parts of life, particularly the hard bits. I mean, imagine lockdown, living on your own, for example.
I
Um,
thought about that during the time, but the problem is you don't. Someone told me this back in 2012 when I first came to Australia. He said he was a really good friend, restaurateur, and he said I must have posted something. It wasn't a video at that time. I said something, a line on Facebook, and he said, I think it was to do with my divorce and custody battle, and he said, never post sad things, bad things that are happening to you on there, because even though your friends will be like, oh, so sorry for you, he said 80% of people, he thought on social media at that time, 80% of people who see someone else suffering on social media enjoy it. They
oh
enjoy
yes.
your suffering. He goes, so don't give that to them, don't share it.
Absolutely. And not only that, what we saw was that people wanting to sink the boot in, like literally want to inflict more pain on this human being who is literally at wit's end and finds no other way to do it but to pour her heart out
Are
on
these
social
people? They
media.
always crawl out from under a rock, don't they? They always find those posts. Where are they coming from?
Absolutely.
I
Well,
think that Facebook must be driving them to the post. I mean, they don't know this woman. I
no.
think they send the haters. I think the AI sends in the haters.
Well, either that or there's just an obsession of people that just, as you said, just seem to enjoy it. And this thing had been this. I was watching the view, like the impression numbers go up, and it was going up like 10,000 a minute. So it was a huge thing. It had 4 million views at that point. So you can just see there was 4 or 5 thousand comments. I didn't leave a comment, but I just took to watch it. So you got sympathy from other females. You got sympathy from a significant proportion of males, but you got the stick the boot in from this other proportion that somehow they thought that they were somewhat special, in a way that you could say that to somebody and that it would stick. Of course, they didn't get a whole lot of support then, and but it was they still wanted to fight back. And I thought, if that's where you get your jollies to
Yeah.
dig the boot in to somebody pouring their heart out online, what kind of horrific person are you?
Well, it says more. I always thought that, coming through film and television as well, and
Mm.
modeling, when someone is bitchy or nasty about another person, when they come with gossip and, they really enjoy it, I'm not really listening to the gossip they're talking about the other person. I'm looking at the person saying it going, thank you so much for revealing who you are. It says far more about the person peddling the bad news and enjoying it than the person they're talking about, right? Because it's a horrific personality trait. I've never liked gossipy people and gossipy women, I have to say. About personal things. Oh, look at her car, look at her house, she's getting fat, all that. I think it's just utterly disgusting. And on the middle-aged woman thing, not meeting your person, I didn't meet my person, the actual person. I had a practice with a few non-actual persons. But meeting the actual person, the love of my life, happened when I was 47. So hang on in there. It can happen. And my husband is a bit of a freak. He traded up in age. I'm actually older than the wife he was with before. So he's a bit weird.
Well, you obviously look. My mum used to say to me, "You take love where you find it." Is an important one, but indifference in a relationship is you can't fix that. So once you become indifferent, you know that it's over.
It's when you
Um,
can't stand to see or hear them eating, Jason. That's the one. Right, because
that's
when my husband eats now, I love it because I'm like, get all that homemade goodness into you. And I enjoy watching him enjoy food. However, in previous relationships, I didn't know why, but when I saw certain people eat, I wanted to chop their head off with an axe. Like, you are the most disgusting, annoying person.
mm.
It was like watching a pig at a trough kind of thing. And it wasn't, they were just doing normal things, but it was because I didn't realize, oh, you don't actually love that person.
Absolutely. Well, I
Yeah.
feel like we're having one of these little sessions that we often do here on the show, but I really feel that there's a lot of value, and I hope that the audience can sort of chime in if you like, and maybe let us know if you appreciate what we're talking about. But
Don't be
um,
mean online. It will come back and bite you in the ass. Karma is real.
well, I'm just thinking about high school reunions, and when I went to my 20th, what was interesting was that at my 10th, I think I was just my daughter was either my ex was pregnant with my daughter. I feel like that was around the time of the 10th, so I was one of the first to become a dad in my late 20s. And most of the other guys, because I went to a boys' school, weren't near that stage. But by the time of our 20th, they were just starting to become dads now, and had already gone through the breakup stage,
Yeah.
or around that particular
Ahead of
component,
your time, Jason.
a little bit ahead of my time. But then we had the very unfortunate situation that we had a funeral of one of our colleagues, our schoolmates at around, he was about 45, 46.
Oh,
And so now the guys I'd seen at my 20th were now coming up to me at the funeral and asking me, how do you cope with a divorce? How do you get through it? And one of these particular fellows was the nicest guy, and he became a lawyer. And he was the best debater I've ever seen. He could argue anything, but he always spoke with his hands. And I'll never forget the time on the
that's
school bus.
me. I
He
try
was
not.
speaking with his hands, and one of his mates grabbed his hands and put them behind his back and said, "Talk now." And he couldn't speak. It was hilarious. But anyway, he came up to me and he was describing it. He was a lawyer, and he was saying, "Mate, I don't know how to handle this." I said, "But you're the lawyer. You should know." He said, "Well, I'm not allowed to defend myself in a divorce case, and it's costing me a fortune."
No,
Um,
men get slammed. My husband got slammed. It's almost like it doesn't matter if you go to the Collins Street lawyer or the country bumpkin lawyer, which unfortunately my husband had. It's basically all the same. The child access, the losing all your money, everything, it's the same. It doesn't matter how highfalutin your lawyer is. And it's very sad for men. It is sad.
I have heard so many different scenarios of how people play it out. So there is this scenario that a husband and wife decide that they're going to get divorced, but they decide to live together until the youngest child turns 18, and they do that obviously so they don't have to go down the pathway of paying out and lawyers and all that stuff. So they agree to
You
split
should just split
amicably.
all your assets 50-50, shake hands and say no harm, no foul, and remove the lawyers is what you should
You
do.
would hope that that would be the case, but
Yeah.
and even when you go to the lawyer, it never works out the 50-50 split, and then you've got to give away this
Oh.
stuff. Then there there's other horrific scenarios that people just convince themselves. Another one I heard of was that a husband and wife decide that they're going to split, and their children aren't yet 18. So what they're going to do is they're each going to spend a week at a time living in the marital home, and then
Oh,
and then
my husband now did that for a little bit. It was a disaster.
I can't imagine how that could possibly work. So it's literally like living in a permanent Airbnb scenario.
Yeah, yeah, it was terrible. And it was terrible because he would like walk in and like there was laundry racks with all her lingerie on it and stuff. It doesn't work. Like it's wrong. Listen, you talk about, I was thinking about going into politics. Listen to one of my policies, which I think is fair for everybody. I'm about fairness in governance, fairness
Hmm.
in life, fairness online, fairness, fairness. So I wanted to bring in something called the Marriage Act, right? This
Hmm.
is very important. Now, lawyers would not like this at all, but the Marriage Act essentially means that as soon as you sign your marriage certificate, part of your marriage certificate is your Marriage Act contract, which means at the point of dissolution of the marriage, any assets that were acquired from the date of the marriage, not before. So if wifey or husband is rich before, that's not part of this. It's just what you've built together. At the point of divorce, it's automatically split 50-50, because what I've seen in courts is that the reason the females usually get the lion's share of a man's assets after he's worked all his life, which is cruel, are the women that chose not to work or refuse to work. And what happens is the state only works under commerce now. These courts only work under commerce. So they feel like, no, you're not dumping her on us. You're not divorcing her. She's jumping on Centrelink. She's never going to work. She's going to need help with the kid or kids. So what they do is they take the lion's share of the assets from the man to give it to the woman so she doesn't become a problem for the state. And they actually said to my husband when they took everything off him, it's all right, you've got a great career, you can keep on working. As if the last 20 years paying off houses and all that shit didn't matter. It's cruel. And so I think the Marriage Act could fly really well. And if there was ever a political party with any sense, I would put it to them. Lawyers wouldn't like it. There's a whole commerce thing that would be missed out. But I think it's fair. And it would also, the reason I thought of it, I talk in my book, The Witches of Turak, which is a great romp if you want to check that out, about women who marry men for money. It would cut out that thing of those young women marrying millionaires for money, and it would also cut out millionaires marrying trollops who they know are marrying them for their money, because it would be 50-50. Right? So there'd be a lot less marriage, like what's considered assets after we got married kind of thing. So I think it could be a really great thing. I think this is one thing I actually agreed with Pauline Hanson on, because she spoke out about this a few years ago before the pandemic, about how men get slammed in divorces. They get slammed financially and they get slammed with access to their kids, and it's not fair. We've got men committing suicide. In England, there was a group, I think they called themselves the Spider-Men. They used to climb up bridges and buildings in the UK and say, with flags and banners, dressed as Spider-Man, and say, I don't want to be here if you're not going to let me see my kids. Basically, the state should not be involved in a relationship. And I felt embarrassed in divorce court, Jason, I don't know about you, that you have to get a third party to try and talk sense into you, to try and get you to be a grown-up. What have you come to in life that you need this person who doesn't know any of the people involved to tell you how to handle your separation? It's awful.
Terrific. Back in the 90s, I studied law briefly, and I was living with a family member interstate who was a lawyer, and we were talking about family law and how messy it was. And and we were just having a general discussion. And he told me that he once asked a family court judge, how do you know when you've made the right decision? And his response was, when both parties are unhappy.
Yes.
And
There
I,
are no winners. That's what they say. It's about who
yes,
loses the most. There's no winners.
correct. So if you're starting from a point of no winners and you're dissolving a marriage, then you have to wonder, um, are we approaching this completely incorrectly?
We
So
are.
one of our viewers the other day shared on our Substack a comment about what was happening in Hungary in terms of the tax laws over there when you have children. And
Mhm.
just to reiterate that particular story, for each child that the married couple has, they get a 25% reduction in their overall taxation burden. So if you have 4 children, you pay no tax for life. So what they're saying is that people having lots of kids, the divorce rate is way down.
Yes.
And so it's solved all of these problems. So the argument is that it's not that people don't want to have children, it's just that they can't afford to have them. So again, another question for the audience, if you having children meant that you got a tax reduction, would you have more children? Because we have an immigration problem in this country. I'm sure that you're aware of it, that we have opened the
We're aware.
doors and are letting 1 million people in. What if in Nicola's political party or my political party or our political party or your political party, there was a policy that said for every child that you have above 2, let's start from there because you need at least 2 to replace yourselves, that there is a tax deduction for the 3rd child.
Yeah.
Would you have a 3rd child? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I really think it would be great. And look, I know people fall out of love, and sometimes when they fall out of love, they fall into hate, particularly if one of you who is not in love anymore meets someone else. I get it. But everything that comes out of the family court is negative, and I sometimes feel it's been engineered that way
Mm.
because it does feel sort of corrupt. Because at the end of a marriage, particularly when children are involved, you've probably got assets that one or both of you has worked for, and you have the children. So really, from your side of the fence, it's all assets.
Mm.
You're fighting over assets, is what I'm saying. You're fighting over positives. So you're
Yes.
fighting over the positives of some financial gain. You're fighting over the positives of beautiful children. Don't let the family court turn all of that into a negative just because you two don't want to be married anymore, right?
Mm.
And this whole thing of wanting to hurt the person who left you or the person who jumped first or whatever, it's so childish. It's not good for your children and it makes you a bad parent. So I think 2 people should be able to say, sit down with pieces of paper, get a lawyer to make sure that the papers are, and they'll try and talk you out of it and say, no, you've got to fight, you've got to do this, because that's to their financial gain. That's why they do it. Be good to your children and each other, split your assets, sort out who's going to take care of the children, talk to the children about that if they're old enough, and be adults, because it's very much like this vaccine rollout and everything we've just been through. If you don't take personal responsibility for you and yours, physical health, mental health, and financial health, that's what a divorce is,
Mm.
then handing it over to the state is always a bad idea. It is a proven bad idea. And a large percentage of all the financial assets that you amassed as a couple then goes to people who did nothing to earn it. The
Yeah.
lawyers who, at the end of the day, no matter how good they are, it always ends up the same. The dad gets every other weekend and the woman gets the lion's share of the money. So you might as well go to a lawyer who's going to charge you 10 grand who's truly crap because he's the same as the expensive lawyers.
I know it's nuts, isn't it? That end result is always that particular case, the every other weekend, and that skews the amount of money that dad's meant to pay to mum. And then
Yeah.
if mum decides that she doesn't want the kids to see dad and uses them as a weapon,
Well, she can't decide that. She can't.
and yet this goes on. This is a scenario that happens. I can report it myself. It's just horrific, the situations that you get into. The only good thing I can say about it is that the kids generally work it out for themselves in time, but it's a long, hard road for dad that's been let down for whatever reason.
I feel for men. I feel for you. I feel for my husband. Watching them go through it as a woman, if you've ever seen a male that's a friend or a brother or a father or, someone you're with go through it, it's appalling how men get treated. It should be illegal. actually, how men get treated in Australia during a divorce?
Well, during COVID, my wife and I studied a counselling course, became qualified counsellors, and that's generally what we deal with is men in situations that they don't know
Crisis.
what to do. They're literally at their wits' end. We got into it because we wanted to specialise in grief counselling, given that we'd gone through so much grief ourselves and have come out the other side, and I've spoken about that before. But it seems that there's more about it's the men in divorce situations, and what happens is they're literally left, like 5 seconds above destitution. They have absolutely nothing left.
Yeah.
And generally, when they come and see me, they can't even afford to pay for their counselling session. So often I'm doing them for free, just to try
Well,
and
the
get
court
them off
says
the
it's
mat.
all right. She gets everything. You can still go to work. You've still got your job. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and so what I saw in a couple of scenarios was that then he gets injured and is on workers' comp and can't meet any of the requirements, and he's literally
Yeah.
in an absolute mental health crisis. So we can only do as much as we can until we detect a mental health scenario, and then we must send them on to the psychiatrist or something like that, because counselling is different. Counselling is a different approach to psychology or psychiatry. You're not dealing with the so-called medical conditions. It's literally like getting your life back in order. So there's two approaches here. So it just depends on where people are coming from, but it's just extraordinary where we're coming from. Now, Nicola, I can't believe we spent half the show doing this subject. We haven't got into the news. I just wanted to completely change the subject for a moment. We talked yesterday about clothing and clothing stores, etc. And I
Yeah.
went into my wardrobe that sits next to me in my studio, where I have all my coats lined up, and I have never worn this one on air. I bought this jacket in 1997. It's made in Italy, and I bought it from an Italian suit shop in North Sydney. And I'll never forget it, because I just saw it in the window. I said, I want that. And I couldn't afford it. I paid $400 28 years ago for this jacket, and I've probably worn it 6 times. But I looked at it and I said, I have to wear it. It's made in Italy. And there's an example of back in the day, for
Very
example. I
nice,
don't,
Jason. But on
but
television, that looks like something that might strobe. But for some reason, Zoom doesn't strobe. So I too wear things that I wouldn't be able to wear on television. So interesting.
So there you go. So that's the I guess that's the advertisement for our fashion today in our show. But there's a ton of stuff that we really need to talk about today. I'm thinking if we get into the news and we'll work backwards from there, and that will give us
Yeah.
extra time. How about it?
My name is Nicola Charles, and I'm a proud anti-vaxxer from Victoria, Australia. Now, I've been worried about vaccines for a long time, but it's not just those clear substances in vials that get injected into people's arms that I'm concerned about. It's vaccines being dropped from the sky as aerosols, and vaccines that are added to liquids that we can drink. In 2013, the Australian government administered 1,000 cholera vaccines to recipients in a drink. Who is delivering your water every day, and what is the quality of that water? They've already told us that it contains fluoride, a neurotoxin. 3 years ago, I stopped drinking tap water and recently went onto the Zeta Potential program. This adds alkalinity to the blood and also increases your electrolytes. Something is giving people mass cancers around the world, and jumping onto Zeta Potential for me has been one way for me to alleviate my fears. If you want to jump on the knowledge train with regard to water, click on the link below this show.
Here is your news for Tuesday, May the 13th. So Matt Canavan has failed in his bid to win the leadership of the National Party as David Littleproud stays in the role. Canavan had vowed to remove net zero from his party's policy if elected leader, but has made some ground on that issue, with Littleproud silent on whether he would maintain the policy or review it. Meanwhile, Tim Wilson has withdrawn from the leadership race for the Liberal Party, suggesting it is not his time. He also says that suggests, of course, that he didn't have the numbers, leaving Angus Taylor to compete against Sussan Ley. Unlike Wilson, Matt Canavan would have known he did not have the numbers, but contested anyway. As Russell Broadbent said, we need more politicians willing to lose in order to get change, and it appears Canavan is well on his way to following that mantra. Remember, in politics, policy reversal is tantamount to moving mountains. Well, now let's tell you about the mountains that President Trump has moved overnight. Well, Zelensky in Ukraine has requested that Trump attend the negotiations with Putin on Thursday. In a social media post, he said, I've just heard President Trump's statement, very important words. I supported President's idea of a full and unconditional ceasefire long enough to provide the foundation for diplomacy, and we want it. We are ready to uphold silence on our end. I supported Trump with the idea of direct talks with Putin. I have openly expressed my readiness to meet. I will be in Turkey. I hope that the Russians will not evade the meeting. And of course, all of us in Ukraine would appreciate if President Trump could be there with us at the meeting. This is the right idea. We can change a lot. President Erdogan can indeed host the highest level meeting, and thank you to everyone who is helping. And meanwhile, Trump has just said that he may well fly to Turkey on Thursday to meet with Putin and Zelensky. Meanwhile, Trump has also signed an executive order to slash prescription drug prices using the most favoured nation pricing. So, it's a detailed story, but let me give you all of it. President Trump has signed a powerful executive order to align US prescription drug prices with those of other advanced nations, often 3 to 5 times lower. The move targets pharmaceutical middlemen, enables direct-to-patient manufacturer pricing, and forces drug makers to offer America the lowest global prices or face enforcement. The order builds on Trump's first-term efforts to put American patients first and reduce the burden of subsidising foreign healthcare systems. It also expands protections to Medicaid, promotes transparency, and delivers massive savings for taxpayers. Meanwhile, Dr. Oz weighed in and said this is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation. And it's only happening because we have a president with the fortitude, the guts to stand up to the withering criticism and lobbying that's going to occur. Meanwhile, RFK Jr. has exposed why everyone in DC is panicking about Trump's executive order lowering the drug prices. He says, there's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator on Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. The industry itself spends 3 times what the largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything about it because it was radioactive. He then went on to say we now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. He cannot be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country, and he's standing here for the American people. He then said Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich are saying that President Trump is on the side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. Trump, for your courage. I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. RFK then went on to reveal that Big Pharma donated $100 million to Trump and still couldn't buy him. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million, but you can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country, and he's standing here for the American people. Trump is now fully exposing Europe's free healthcare scam. It's never been free because Americans were paying for it one way or another. This means American patients were effectively subsidising socialist healthcare systems in Germany and in all parts of the EU. Trump then came out and said, in Europe, Ozempic costs $88 and in the US it costs $1,300. He then said for years pharmaceutical and drug companies said research and development costs had to be borne by America alone. Well, not anymore. This means that American patients were effectively subsidising socialist healthcare systems in other countries. Trump then went on to say that he will add on tariffs if countries don't follow the drug policy. Meanwhile, in Australian media, they dug up this fellow called Jared Monsheen, who came out and who is a director of research at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, and said the move is set to impact all developing countries as pharmaceutical companies look to balance out their lost profits from the drop in US medication costs. The federal government spent $17.7 billion on subsidising medicines in the 23-24 financial year here in Australia. As part of a budget measure, the Australian government released a PBS cap for pensioners and concession card holders, meaning that the price of $7.70 would be frozen until June 30, 2029. However, the government may be forced to increase the cost of medications for non-concession card holders as pharmaceutical companies look to recoup their losses. This one is on elbow. There is clearly a dynamic that the US feels that the US allies and partners are not paying their fair share. It's a tough predicament, Monsheen said. Meanwhile, Sky News host Laura Jays described the news as a game changer on Monday afternoon, and its impacts are already having a huge impact on Australian pharmaceutical industry, with ASX-listed companies crashing on Monday in fear of being forced to reduce their drug prices. Meanwhile, the US stock market surged nearly 1,000 points at opening, given the US-China interim trade agreement. Scott Bessent said the Chinese delegation basically told us that once President Biden came into office, they just ignored their obligations. We had an excellent trade agreement with China and the Biden administration chose not to enforce it. Meanwhile, progressive faith leaders are currently blocking the entrance to the ICE detention centre in New Jersey, the same facility Newark Mayor Ras Baraka and other Democrats stormed last week, so now they are obstructing ICE. Meanwhile, American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander has been handed by Hamas to the International Red Cross in Gaza. We've since now learned that he's returned home to his family. He has been reunited with his family at the Israeli border, and that was after 580 days in captivity. Hamas says it wants to immediately begin negotiations to reach a comprehensive and sustainable ceasefire agreement with Israel. It's a big, big story there. And of course, Alexander was the last of the American hostages, and he was also the last one since late February to be released. So it's a big deal what's happening over there. Meanwhile, in the UK, a fire has broken out at Keir Starmer's £2 million London home, with the entire street cordoned off. GB News' Mark White reported that after Downing Street responded to the fire at his home in the northwest London, suggesting that it may have started deliberately. And a power outage has also hit the London Underground, causing major travel disruptions in the capital city. And also a jury of 8 men and 4 women have officially been sworn in the Diddy trial, which is all about Sean Combs' sex traffic and racketeering. The trial began with horrific, degrading details of the sexual abuse suffered by Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, and others. Nicola.
I wouldn't normally focus on this kind of story, but what's happening with Diddy is in entertainment, and I was a model and an actress. Then I had a music contract with Mushroom Records, and I've done film and television and radio. So I think I've pretty much been through the gamut of media and entertainment. And there's very much on the social scene that goes with it, music parties, cast parties, after awards parties, that kind of thing. There's very much a Freemasony vibe, as in, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens at these parties stays at these parties, even at, people's houses and stuff. And what happens is when a case like Diddy's comes along, people actually learn some of the details of things that for those of us who were in the industry, we knew to be the norm all along. I have seen things at parties that would make people's toes curl up. It's horrible. It's ugly. And you talked the other day about, isn't it funny how people who are in entertainment always say they don't want their kids to go into the business. This is why. This is why. Because the things I've seen on sets, off sets, are just so repugnant and just cross so many boundaries. And the fact that it's public. This is the thing about these people from entertainment, right? They have a mindset that I think wasn't there some Madonna film, right? Remember when Madonna was dating Warren Beatty? And she did, I think it was the sex film. It was around that sex book time. And he was doing and saying something, and she was acting out, because the cameras were rolling. And he said something under his breath like, because nothing happens off camera, right? Because what's the point in living off camera? Basically saying she was a massive exhibitionist. And it made it into the film, I'm sure she had editorial control, but to her credit, it made it into the film. And that's what they're all like in entertainment. Right. So they want even their sexual, non-discretions or whatever to be seen by other people. They see it as like a power thing. It's very much, this is quite unsavory, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's like when your dogs go to the park and you'll see 2 male dogs look like they're having sex, right? They're not. I'm a dog breeder. They're not. One of the dogs is dominating the other dog. That's what this a message saying, I own your ass, right? And that's why people in the entertainment industry do these sexual things. And that's usually what it's about. in front of other people. It's a dominance thing to say, who's the daddy? I'm the daddy, and I'm also the diddy.
And the daddy does the diddying. It's
Mm,
that is really interesting. It's a very important perspective for people to understand the way that the industry works. And it is an industry of domination, isn't it? It's all measured
yeah.
by success, how much money someone got for their next film, their next TV role. It wouldn't be much different in the sporting world when you consider when the contracts are going around and someone gets a big contract, and we've seen that. And it's also interesting when you look at if, for example, in football, that these players, the young kids, 18, 19, 20, can get very big contracts. And you also notice that around 21, 22, these sports, rugby league stars especially, they tend to be married quite young, and they'll have a couple of kids. You'll see them on the field, 21, and they're carrying two kids on their
That
arms.
doesn't stop it.
No, it doesn't stop it. What I'm saying is that how they get started early because the
Yeah.
money has come in. Whereas in general society, people might not get married until they're in their 30s because they're still trying to build some sort of basis. I always used to watch when my tradie friends would always get married before my university professional friends
Mm.
because they were earning money earlier. It was just the natural progression of things that's what they did. It didn't make it any more successful, any less successful. It was just a different passage in life. So if you get into the the entertainment industry. It's not the media; it's the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And you land a big job, and then you see what's happened to some of these kids. You look at poor old Justin Bieber, and the way that he looks today. You can't even recognize this kid. And of course, the whole Diddy story is bound to come out
Well,
sooner or
they're
later.
carrying all the ugliness, Jason. They're carrying the knowledge. And you can see in their eyes when they start, particularly as children, you see the innocence that should be there and is in all our children. And then it doesn't take long. They're lucky if they get to 18 or 21. Miley Cyrus is a perfect example
Oh
of that.
yes.
And what happens is then they have to act alive and innocent because really, in the moments where they're not working at it, they're dead in the eyes because the things they've seen, it's like
Mm.
an abuse victim, you know?
Mm. Well, they are, aren't they? They are
Yeah,
just a very
you've
expensive
seen,
abuse victim.
yeah, very expensive abuse victim. Good description. Yeah.
Miley Cyrus is a really interesting case, and not necessarily being a fan of her music. I'm a fan of her cover versions that she's done. She's done so many great cover versions.
Well,
She
she's
did
got a great voice.
unbelievable voice. She
Mm.
did. I saw her do Heart of Glass, Debbie Harry and Jolene, Dolly Parton, and they are some of the most magnificent
She's
versions.
got the hard whiskey drinking, smoking
Oh,
voice. Like it's
incredible!
pretty cool.
And you watch her and you think that this woman has got one of the great rock voices of her time, and then you look and think of all the silly things that she had to do to build, popularity amongst it, and all the the revealing and the
I think
nudity
she
and the
has a
rest of it.
country voice, but that's
Well,
me.
she does, but she can literally do anything. That's what I mean. She's just so talented, and you just sort of think that if she had a time over again, would she have done it in a different way? I don't know. I don't know how these things work.
I
Then I
don't know
look.
how Billy Ray Cyrus didn't protect her from all of the stuff she's been through, which has been, very public, because he
And
was experienced and he was a good old boy, country boy as well, right? So he should have
mhm.
known and he should have protected her better.
And
I
then you
said to my
yeah.
kids yesterday, even when you're grown up, right? Because my mom still does it from the UK. Even when you're grown up, you're still my kid. Because one of my kids is about to turn 18 and she's like, yeah, I can't wait to turn 18. And I said to her, what? So you can tell me, shut up. I'm a grown up now. You can't tell me what to do. I said, I'm going to be your parent if I'm still alive when you're 50. That's
Mm.
how that works. But these kids in particular are let loose. But what's more awful, and what I personally saw in television, is then some of the adults, the much older adults, I'm talking 40s and 50s, who should know better, then engage in activities with these more or less children or, barely legal people that they shouldn't be engaging in because, well, it's entertainment and that's how it rolls. And then you think, God, you're disgusting. You play a nice person on television, but actually you are disgusting. And
Mm.
then they bounce onto set and they talk about innocent things and grab your backpack and let's go to school. And you just think, God, you are a good actress because the real
Mm.
you is horrible.
What do you think they're trying to, is that another example of the domination to try and sneak one in? Like it's almost like a below the belt blow and then walk out in front of the camera
I
and
think
then
old fart actors and performers and musicians are bitter and twisted about getting old. and they want to ruin young people. I think that's what I experienced a paedophile, unfortunately, as a child. He was my next door neighbor. I definitely think they want to ruin children. They want to get there first and they want to ruin them. And everyone knows it in entertainment, right? And they think, well, that's the way it is. I mean, look at Harvey Weinstein. Apparently, I won't name them. They have been named. Apparently, every massive Hollywood female star, and I could name 3 to 5, I won't, in famous sitcoms and movies, and all of those elegant, almost royal looking celebrities who carry themselves with such dignity, and they're so softly spoken. It's like a Penny Wong scenario. You speak softly, but behind the scenes there's a monster lurking under the hood. And they did not get there without going through Harvey Weinstein, right? And so actresses and starlets, I lived in LA for a while, but I was having babies when I was there. I wasn't trying to act. You spend your whole entire career, years and years, hoping and praying that you're getting the room with a massive casting director like Deborah Acquia, or that you'll get invited into a meeting with a Harvey Weinstein. The problem is, should your dream ever come true, you find out what Hollywood's really about.
And then you wonder, therefore, that anyone who's ever been cast in a Harvey Weinstein film that's gone on to be successful, had they had to have gone through the casting couch. It seems it's almost inevitable. And there it is. It's extraordinary. And so what is it? And that would explain the way the world works now. So if that's what you need to do, is it any wonder that we have a citizen's casting couch in the whole industry that became OnlyFans, because it's just seen now that that's how it works, and so that they literally work for themselves and bear everything to.
Well, why do you think I'm an unemployed actress? Do you think it's because I'm a crap actress? Have you seen any of my work? Do you think it's because I can't act?
Exactly.
That's not the reason.
Yep, and you're not the only person that's said that to me. I've got friends that I've known for years that have said similar things, that were offered big roles and then they were told what they were expected to do, and so they wouldn't take them. And then, of course, you then look and see who took that role, and that tells you everything that you need to know. And so then you follow it along, and so there's always different pathways. So there's the pathway that another performer becomes, has health problems, drug problems, this problem, that problem, in court, domestic violence, all of these things. And is it any wonder that these things occur and occur over and over and over again? It seems that it's just obvious. It is a plague.
It's a horrible industry. If you can get your kids to do anything else, I'm not saying that this kind of stuff doesn't go on in the medical industry or, any other kind of industry, insurance, whatever. All I know is what I know. For instance, I got a recording contract for my album called Listening in Colour with Mushroom Records in the UK. First off, as a songwriter, I have a contract with Albert Music in Australia, because I've written over 30 songs that are all original, and they sell them to other people and use them for computer games and stuff like that. But for 2 years, I recorded on Pink Floyd's Houseboat on the Thames in London, all paid for in this $500,000 contract with £500,000 contract with Mushroom Records in the UK. So we record for 2 years, and I'm working with all the top musicians and band guys, and we put it through the Pink Floyd Houseboat because it's analog, so it sounds really rock and roll, which it was. Then they fly me to LA to have it edited and worked on, re-recorded by Chris Lord-Alge, who was the producer for the whole albums. And this album sounds amazing. So on the completion of the album, and after a big chunk of money was dumped into my bank account, congratulations on completion, and 2 years of my life, I get taken out for dinner in Chelsea by one of the owners of the label and told that we're going away for the weekend. And I said, I'm not going away for the weekend. I love my boyfriend. I was with my daughters now. I wasn't married to him then, but I was with their dad. And within 48 hours, I'd been dropped from that label. They'd sold my album back to me for $1. In other words, going, it's not worth shit. Take it for $1. And they said, yeah, you can keep the money in your bank account. Piss off.
Wow.
Because I didn't play that game. So I have my album and my kids have my album and some other people are busy using my songs, but I haven't because I wouldn't play the game. And they did that to me after 2 years of hard work. And that's how it rolls. So then I have to look at other people who were successful, even from my own show that I was on, and I think, how did that work exactly?
Mm.
How did I not make it past that hurdle and you did? Yeah.
Is it any wonder, therefore, that both of us have followed this pathway very closely? Mine out of just interest and empathy and sympathy for victims, but also because I've been fascinated by the way the industry has worked for such a long period of time. It was inevitable that I suppose working. Look, I must have worked 20 years in professional TV behind the scenes as, various different roles, including TV production. But I was lucky enough that I was in the home shopping space that doesn't have any of this
It
glamour to
doesn't.
it. No, well, I tell you what, I tell you what it does have is that it has a lot of people that have come from there who are
Oh
trying to
God. The
trying
ones who
to.
said no all end up on home shopping.
Well, yeah, yes and no, because many people considered it the hardest job in TV because where I worked, it was all ad lib. This wasn't the pre-recorded
Ad libs,
30-minute
right?
infomercials that you see. This
Yeah.
is the live format. And so, as a producer, we would be given a group of products, and we would have to be able to present them in the allotted time period. And you'd either have one product for an hour, or you'd have multiple. And so, it was my job to create a narrative to be able to sell these to the general public. And because it was direct response TV, you would see on a screen next to you the phone lines lighting up. And sometimes, if it was working really well,
That's
you'd have
fun.
you'd have 100 phone lines, light up. Other times, if you were selling a very big ticket item, the phone might not ring for the entire show.
I'm going to
And
star you in a movie about home shopping, Jason. I think that would be perfect.
oh, I'd love to do. I mean, there was one Holy Man with Eddie Murphy, but it only sort of scratched the surface. But we
Like a
used to.
Magnolia movie, but about home
Ooh,
shopping instead of
that
game shows.
that would be absolutely fantastic because we often used to talk about how we could have a sitcom because every crazy person, it's full of, people, the same thing. It was just at a different level.
And the
People,
crap products that you're trying to sell, you're trying to make look high quality. And they used to feature that a lot on the comedy show. One of my favorite shows, I've got all the DVDs, absolutely fabulous in the UK. The mom was addicted to home shopping.
oh,
And they used to say live on the TV, hello, the last lady you called, love, could you hang up the phone because no one else can get through?
that's hysterical. Well, I will say that, look, like any industry, there are addicts and there were shopaholics. There were people that would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. There were people that would buy skincare products and have whole rooms filled with them at home. There were people that would send in photographs of their jewelry collection that might contain 100 different rings. Like, what would you do with them? So yeah,
Yeah, you don't
this
have
was a
100
problem.
fingers.
Yeah, and so there is a component of addiction. Now, what was interesting was that the people that worked there were generally all, not shopaholics, but they all bought what they sold. So they
They
believed in.
did?
Oh, people always, there was always things. There was, great kitchen appliances, computers, cameras, clothing, good skincare, great healthcare products, lots of things that you would
I
buy.
love Pyrex. I only store in glass. So if I was selling glass and Pyrex, I'd be right in there.
Well, the hundreds of brands. But I'll tell you what was interesting that my friends that worked at the at the racing channel, for example, well,
Mm.
they were all punters. They all bet on the horses. That was what they did. We were just spending our money, or part of our money, on some of the things that we would sell. Because remembering, when you're selling, there's nothing quite like believing in the product. If you believe in it, it's easy to sell. If you don't believe in it, you can't sell it.
Well, they had
So
to be on the product cult to be able to sell.
oh, absolutely. But it was your job in a way to be a successful producer. You wanted to be sold by the sales rep or the person representing. So not
Mm.
that you allow them to sell it to you, but you would just directly focus on how to do it. Look, I had some wonderful times doing home shopping. I'll never forget in my second incarnation for a different channel, they after the movie Parasite came out, the Korean movie that featured the
Yeah,
Chapagetti
good
noodle
movie.
product, they came to me because the company was Korean and they said, "You're going to sell the noodles." And my colleagues laughed at me and said, "You're selling 2-minute noodles on home shopping TV. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Oh, this is going to be fantastic." So what I did was I created a pop-up restaurant within the studio, invited all of my presenters to come along and some of my favorite guest presenters. So we had this fully filled restaurant with a chef in the middle, one of whom was one of our presenters, and another chef. And we did it. And it was fabulous. So they literally were doing a live taste test, and they weren't expecting that they were going to be tasting some sort of food that wasn't particularly interesting. Well, the way that they did it, it was a huge hit. We sold out completely.
No way.
And everyone said, well, only Jason was able to do that. But this was the point. At the end of the
But
day,
you can sell tea to China, Jason.
yeah, or ice to Eskimos, sand to Arabs, all of the above. Look, it's really interesting. I'll tell you what was one interesting one quickly was that I was coming to work one day, massive pollution over Sydney Harbour Bridge, and I got there and I said to some of the staff, "Have we still got that air purifier?" And yes, we did. So we went out and put it on air, and of course everyone wanted one because you couldn't find them. And let me tell you, I have still got that air purifier, and we use it. And when we use it, no one snores.
Oh,
Explain that one to me. Yeah, it stops snoring.
interesting.
So there's something in the air that causes you to snore apart from yourself. So that's a
Mm.
fascinating one. So it's not all just selling stuff that you don't need or don't want that doesn't work. You need
There's
to be
something
able to.
adorable about what you've just described, right? So I'm in the industries that are considered the coolest. There's posters of you. I did magazine covers,
Yep. Yep.
and all of this stuff. Voted the second sexiest woman in the world in the UK. Entertainment world, not the
Mm.
real world. And music and film and television and honestly, it's so ugly behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And then you're describing home shopping, which is like this lovely little island of pureness that you do actually love the products and therefore they are good and you want to sell them. I mean, if that isn't a beautiful Australian movie, if anyone knows anyone who wants to fund that movie called Home Shopping starring Jason Olbourne, I'll produce it and write it for you.
Fabulous. I tell you what. Well, it's not as pure and as glamorous as that, but it's certainly not as nasty as others. There's always a nasty streak, and there's people fighting over certain things.
It
But
must
what's
be
real?
because the money's so big in entertainment, right? Look at the Diddy story. That's what started this chat. It
Yes.
must be because the money's so big. And also, I do think we do live in a world where people like to work with people who are compromised. For instance, I shared a post yesterday on X from Tanya Plibersek, who is now the Minister for Social Services.
Mm,
Before that, I believe she was the Minister for the Environment. Now,
correct.
she is married to a convicted heroin dealer
Mm.
who went to jail, was let out of jail, I believe someone commented 19 months early, and he now works in the New South Wales Treasury. So when you talk about compromised people working within systems, I think that's part of it, right? Because my husband didn't get elected. He's a good guy. He's a clean guy. And that they've got nothing on him, right? So those people don't do well. And yet all these people with these horrible histories that you think, I don't want you sitting in the treasury if you were a heroin dealer. I don't want that. Dealing with public funds. I don't find that a trustworthy legacy. And yet here they are working in Australian politics. And it's like no harm, no foul. And you've got to ask yourself all these rumors about only compromised people do well in entertainment, in politics. Maybe it's true because they are compromised. They do have stuff on these people, and yet they continue to do well. Like Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, being the cover boy for a communist newspaper when he was younger. It's as if this stuff doesn't exist. And like I said, people have memories of goldfish, or they want to ignore the facts. They call it misinformation because it's an inconvenient truth. I mean, extreme, right? Extraordinary.
Mm. It certainly is. And that's what we've learnt in this political process. There was only the story the other day of Albanese dropping Ed Husic and Attorney General Mark Dreyfus from the cabinet, and that being a nasty factional war that broke out. And now people were saying that we're finally seeing the genuine nasty side of Albanese. It was actually reported. So I found that interesting.
Mm.
that they're bringing that up. I think it's a good time as we're getting close to the end of the show already. But the story yesterday of Matt Canavan standing up for the Nationals and being defeated, and David Littleproud being returned. So therefore, the National Party have decided that they got a status quo result in the election and are going to maintain the status quo. So it's an
Okay.
example that they're not interested in taking any political risks at this point and not getting anyone offside.
Mm.
For mine, I would have run my leadership challenge after the Liberals, because the Liberals are going to affect change, and that would have at least set the scene whether the Nationals wanted to go along or not. Now, yesterday in the Australian newspaper, it was suggested even that the Nationals would consider splitting from the Liberals. Now, I know for one that that's something that I've been talking about for a little while now, because I believe that if we can consolidate the third party movement could then, if the Nationals were to split from the Liberals, would then form a coalition with a newly formed National Party that was pro moving away from net zero, recognising that they are a national party and not a globalist party, and that would form the process of real political power being assembled. So I just find it interesting that with Canavan being defeated yesterday, that doesn't mean a whole lot, because in 2007, when John Howard was defeated, Brendan Nelson became the leader of the Liberal Party for a short period of time before eventually being replaced by Tony Abbott, who became the greatest opposition leader, in my opinion, in this country. And I was still a Labor supporter at that time. That's how good Abbott was, that I would acknowledge how good he was. So I think Canavan, by putting his hand up, has taken the Russell Broadbent pledge to be a good, honest politician. He's put his head on the chopping block early on. He will recover. He's a young man. He's very talented. He comes from Queensland, which I think is where the leadership's going to have to come from, because it's going to be built in the regions, and that's the strongest Conservative vote in the country comes from Queensland. So everything's working in the right place. Littleproud is on notice now, because I'll tell you what, if we can descend, because the freedom movement's going to have to do something. We can't. There's no status quo. We have to change. So I believe that a certain proportion will join the National Party, and I know certain friends of mine that were in the UAP have already joined the National Party before the election. I'm going to reach out to some of them and find out what they're finding there, because if you can get some more support into the Nationals, the party that should be anti-globalist, you are a long way along to being able to change the party from within. Today, we're going to see either Angus Taylor or Sussan Ley become the leader of the Liberals, both of which are a disaster. The only good thing is if Angus Taylor does accept the leadership or becomes the leader, and Jacinta Price becomes the deputy, that's the good sort of lining. I mean, she was still pro-vaccine, and there's still plenty of criticisms about Jacinta Price. But for an Indigenous lady to come out and vote no for the Voice and lead that campaign, that is there's a whole lot of good there versus a whole lot of bad.
I interviewed her on TNT, and I thought she was a pretty good chick. I don't want to be disappointed, later on, but she seems to have her ducks in a row.
So again, politics, 51-49, zeros and ones, binary, left and right, all of the rest of it. You only compete on that one particular issue. Nobody is perfect, but we've seen in the Trump era, there were many things that people could criticize Trump about, but all of a sudden, all that tariff stress we've seen today has changed. The stock market's up 1,000 points. What he's done to Big Pharma, and kudos to our viewer who left the comment and said, what if you read between the lines on the pharmaceuticals, if you take away the money from the profits from pharmaceutical, they've got less money to spend on advertising.
Yes.
And so that's a huge deal. And then Bobby Kennedy's come out and said that he wants to get rid of Big Pharma advertising. So imagine if you got rid of it altogether, then the power's gone completely. And if that's the case, the mainstream media is going to have to find other sponsors which aren't there, which means they've got less money available.
Well, I also think Big Pharma and medical tyranny is a partner of the overall tyranny that they want to bring to this world, this digital control matrix and all of that stuff. Isn't it interesting, by the way, how there are no more global speakers on digital ID? I reckon they've used their AI systems, their artificial intelligence. They've put their finger on the pulse, and everyone, if I ask a poll, every single person says, I won't be getting one. I'm not getting one. I'm not getting involved in that.
Isn't that interesting? And therefore, if we think,
so it's done, it's gone.
Let's think about this a little bit more. So for the United States to come out and push the Real ID the way that they did in a country that you knew that it would fail, and to come out and then retreat on the day that it's meant to come out and say, well, there are other options that you can have here.
Yeah, your passport's fine. Oh, okay.
Exactly, perfect. Well, if I need a passport to prove my identity to travel domestically, then so be it. I'll wear that. Although, having said that, I've got to go and get a passport this week, and it's $420 in Australia to get a renewed passport. Anywhere else in the world,
That's
it's
the
like
price of
$100.
your freedom right now, Jason. Pay it with glee and joy.
Oh, absolutely. But
Yeah.
I feel like it's a ransom. But it's typical of Australia that we have to have the dearest passports in the world. Anywhere else, you're looking at $100 for a
Yeah,
passport.
that's
But
right. Because mine's British and it doesn't cost that. So yeah, they don't
yeah,
want you going anywhere. It's funny, Australians used to be the biggest global travelers when I was still in London. There was Aussies everywhere. And they went there to work and moved
yeah.
around an awful lot. So it's strange that they would penalize them. Or they obviously just think, you're going to travel a lot, you're going to pay for it. It's like the new Australians coming in. I put up a picture of, it was a bit rude. It was Albanese and some other guy. I think it's Chalmers, the treasurer. And they've got their troughs in the gold coins. It's on my X account, and they've got snouts instead of noses. And I wrote, welcome to Australia. Now give me your fucking money.
That's perfect. I love it. Oh,
It's
brilliant.
literally what it is. The Australian government right now looks to these new Australians like, you're my friend and I voted for you. They are a black widow spider. They
Mm.
are luring you in and then you're going to pay. That's how it works.
Oh, absolutely. I just quickly want to look before we get to the end of the show, the great quote that I quoted a couple of times on Kash Patel from his book. I'll see if I can find it somewhere. Um, oh, goodness me. I'm not going to find it, but it was the comment where he said that power that will do absolutely anything to stay in power. That's to paraphrase it, and that's exactly what we're experiencing
Totally.
with the Labor Party in this country. And of course, they look at that as a sign of success. They've had an increased majority, 91 seats and counting in the Australian Parliament, and we have to go for the next 3 years on this. It'd be very unlikely with what's going on that there'd be a double dissolution. So we're looking at 2028 at this stage before there is change. But politics is a pendulum, and when it goes in one direction, it reaches a point of no return and comes back the other way, and it swings hard. So this is the period for all of us to consolidate, to realise what we're up against, to organise and to get set. And after today's discussion, I think it's been a really healthy cleansing of a lot of subjects that I think people will appreciate, that we've been able to deal with it in a mature way without the nasties that are involved in mentioning the horrible word, the words that you would normally have to mention, but just to appreciate what actually goes on there in real life. And this Diddy trial will expose a lot of stuff to a lot of people that have had their head in the sand or aren't aware of what's going on. So I would like to think that perhaps in 3 or 4 weeks' time, when this trial concludes, and more than likely it will result in a Diddy conviction or convictions, and that man will go away for a long period of time, you would expect, then should the Epstein stuff come out, the world will have been prepared. And so timing is everything. At this stage, what I'm saying is just, look, it's partly expectation, and it's partly a confident hope of what's coming. It just feels that that's the case, and the Epstein thing will be like a nuclear bomb in comparison to what we're seeing now in terms of the Diddy case, because people will now expect that if some of their celebrities, not just Diddy but other ones, are named for the horrific acts that they have done, then when it comes to people who are meant to be even more respected doing things that are even worse, then they'll get it.
These are people that you've paid to buy their CDs or their online music from Spotify. These are people whose movies you've paid to go and see. And let me tell you, as the truth starts to trickle out, and it's interesting that Trump says he's going to save Hollywood, right? That's interesting. What kind of Hollywood are you saving? When the truth comes out, what's great about it is you're going to be so relieved that you're a plumber or a bookmaker. You're going to be so pleased that you weren't part of that filth. Thanks so much for watching The Daily Australian with myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host and co-producer, Jason Olborn. Happy Tuesday. We will do this all over again tomorrow. My name is Nicola Charles, and I'm a proud anti-vaxxer from Victoria, Australia. Now, I've been worried about vaccines for a long time, but it's not just those clear substances in vials that get injected into people's arms that I'm concerned about. It's vaccines being dropped from the sky as aerosols and vaccines that are added to liquids that we can drink. In 2013, the Australian government administered 1,000 cholera vaccines to recipients in a drink. Who is delivering your water every day, and what is the quality of that water? They've already told us that it contains fluoride, a neurotoxin. 3 years ago, I stopped drinking tap water and recently went onto the Zeta Potential program. This adds alkalinity to the blood and also increases your electrolytes. Something is giving people mass cancers around the world, and jumping onto Zeta Potential for me has been one way for me to alleviate my fears. If you want to jump on the knowledge train with regard to water, click on the link below this show.